World News Today, brought to you by the Admiral Corporation, makers of Admiral Radio, America's smart set. By shortwave broadcast direct from important overseas stations, as well as leading news centers of our own country, CBS correspondents are waiting to bring you a complete report from the world's political and battlefronts. But first, here's Doug Edwards.
Here are the highlights of today's news. American planes have carried out the greatest daylight operation of the war against unannounced targets in Germany. The Allies have turned back repeated German counterattacks at Anzio. Russian forces have moved closer to Pskov, and the Pacific offensive continues. For details, Admiral Radio takes you now to CBS Pearl Harbor. Webley Edwards reporting.
It's February 1944, and we're at the U.S. Fleet Post Office at 80 Varick Street. 80 Varick Street is in the Hudson Square area of Manhattan, just north of Canal Street and southeast of the Holland Tunnel to New Jersey. The street itself was named for Richard Varick, an early New York lawmaker, landowner, and mayor from 1789 to 1801. The Fleet Post Office was established on July 1st, 1943. Previously, mail addressed to naval personnel serving overseas was handled by Navy mailmen at the Morgan Annex of the New York General Post Office. When CBS's World News Today signed on February 20th, 1944 at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the Allied forces had just begun Big Week, a 6-day strategic bombing campaign against the Third Reich. By the time it ended on February 25th, German cities Rostock and Augsburg had been bombed, as well as several Dutch cities near the German border. The Germans also lost more than 350 aircrafts, and more importantly, more than 100 pilots. Lieutenant A.E. Newton is in charge of this post office, but with forces in the European theater growing larger by the day, it was already obvious this post office had reached max capacity. Space was being acquired on Pier 51 of the Hudson River to handle the expected increase of letters and parcels to fighting servicemen. Here's Bill Slocum Jr. at the Fleet Post Office discussing how V-mail works.
There seems to be little doubt that the fighting men overseas want mail, all the mail they can get. For a report on just how the V-mail machines operate, Admiral Radio takes you to the Fleet Post Office here in New York. Bill Slocum Jr. reporting.
Listen to that sound for a second or two, please. It sounds a little like a heart pounding and pushing lifeblood through a very tired and busy human body. Well, that's precisely what it does. It's V-mail equipment. This piece happens to be in the Navy's Fleet Post Office in New York. But similar pieces of machinery are scattered all over the world. And wherever they are, they're helping tired and busy humans carry on a back-breaking job. If you're a son or daughter in the services, you certainly have been told much more eloquently than I can tell you just what mail means to a fighting man or woman. I have no intention of making a pep talk about writing to soldiers and sailors. I'll leave that to my emotional contemporaries. But as a fair country reporter, I think I found out the second best way to tell your guy or gal whatever is on your mind. That way is through the use of V-mail. There are several reasons, but I think you can throw them all out the window after the first reason. And that is, anything you send by V-mail will get where it's sent. Planes crash, ships sink, but V-mail negatives stay right here. If one is lost, it is sent off again. Yes, somebody reads V-mail material before it goes overseas. But, and so many of us don't seem to realize this, somebody reads every letter before it is sent overseas. There's nothing anybody can do about censors. V-mail is the process of photographing letters and then sending the negatives over for developing and delivering. A roll of V-mail film weighs 5 ounces, and it is the equivalent of a 35-pound sack of normal mail. And there is no limit to the number of pages you send, so long as each is properly addressed. 40,000 letters go through these machines here at Fleet Post Office, New York, and they can very easily handle twice as many. And the Navy says if the demand increases, they'll just get more machines. Yes, the Army and Navy want you to use V-mail. They know better than anyone just what mail means to fighting men and women, and they are determined to see that mail gets to these men and women. But they'd like to use the space now used by mail sacks for other things. Things that will get your man or boy back home sooner. And, as I said, V-mail is good. but it's only the second best way to tell your guy or gal what's on your mind. I return you now to Admiral Radio.
In September 1944, the parcel post section was moved to Pier 51. The Fleet Post Office continued until the end of the war. By January 1946, with many troops home, most of its functions had been moved back to the General Post Office. World News Today's sponsor, the Admiral Corporation, was originally known as the Transformer Corporation of America. By 1929, it was the biggest supplier of radio parts in the world. But bankruptcy ensued, and in 1936, owner Ross D. Siragusa purchased the rights to change the name to Admiral Corporation America, Inc. They began sponsoring World News Today in 1942. For a longer look at the news from this week, tune into Breaking Walls episode 148.
Now, once again, here is Warren Sweeney with a word from Admiral Radio.
The Admiral automatic record changer is the product of years of careful research and is a triumph of modern engineering skill. Because of its very simplicity and trouble-free mechanism, it is small wonder that Admiral attained leadership as the world's largest manufacturer of radio phonographs with automatic record changers. The Admiral changes records quickly, taking only 6 seconds as compared to some others taking twice as long. Admiral's counterbalanced tone arm is a vast improvement over other types. It exerts only 1 ounce of pressure. This results in better tone and longer life for your records. Your highly prized records are safe in an Admiral automatic changer, for there is far less chance of chipping or breaking them. It's a thrilling experience to load an Admiral automatic changer with 10 or 12 records, then just sit back and enjoy hearing them played flawlessly, one by one, without going near the instrument. When peace comes again and Admiral's wartime job is done, Admiral, America's smart set, in combination with the world's finest automatic record changer, will again be available. The appearance of personnel of the armed services on this program does not constitute an endorsement of our product. World News Today is brought to you each Sunday at this hour by the Admiral Corporation, makers of Admiral Radio, America's smart set. Be sure to listen again next Sunday when Admiral brings you World News Today by shortwave, direct from leading news centers of the world. This is Warren Sweeney speaking coast to coast for Admiral Radio, makers of our country's smartest set. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
WBBM, Chicago.
Here comes the happiest band in the land, Al Trace and his Silly Symphony.
Meanwhile, as the weather warmed on April 6, 1944, the U.S. celebrated Army Day, while Al Trace and his Silly Symphonists took to the air over mutual broadcasting from the Plantation Room in the Dixie Hotel.
That's right, everyone. It's the happiest band in the land, music by Al Trace and his Silly Symphonists. Just in case you don't recognize that theme song, it's the one Al made famous, Maresy Dotes and Dosey Dotes. Music this morning coming to you from the Plantation Room of the Hotel Dixie, 43rd Street, west of Broadway in New York City. We're going to get the proceedings underway now with American Polka.
The Dixie Hotel opened on West 43rd Street between 7th and 8th Avenue in 1930. It featured 1,000 rooms and a bus terminal, which occupied the entire ground floor. Buses arriving at the terminal would drive onto a turntable, which would then rotate toward the proper slip. 2 sets of doors, one on either side of the terminal, led from the loading area to the waiting room. The waiting room had a cafe, newsstand, ticket booths, and elevators leading to the hotel's lobby. The hotel was developed by the Uris Buildings Corporation, which announced plans for the site in September of 1928. But a year after it opened, it was foreclosed on, so the Bowery Savings Bank ran it until 1942, when the Dixie became part of the Carter Hotel chain. That year, the Dixie Lounge Bar opened on the first floor. Decorated in a Southern colonial style, it could be accessed from the lobby, the dining room, and directly from the street. The nightclub, along with the adjacent Plantation Room restaurant, fit 500 people. The bus depot became redundant when the Port Authority bus terminal opened nearby in 1950. It was closed in 1957. Carter attempted to rehabilitate the hotel several times, even renaming it the Carter Hotel in 1976. They sold it the next year. New Yorkers knew this hotel as one of the worst in the city. It was closed in 2014.
Music by Al Trace and the Silly Symphonies. So now here's a little game we're going to play. It's a song called Oh Please Tell Me Darling. We drop the last word off each time we sing it. So let's try it. Al Trace, Oh Please Tell Me Darling.